Let's call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Ricardo Diaz,
Here.
Tony Allegretti,
Present.
Katrina Kindle, Peggy Patton,
Here.
Ashley Withers.
No, we have 3 out of 5. We have quorum. Ashley checked in since over a month ago. She wasn't going to be able to make it, and Katrina has a medical situation that she's taking care of. So, but it still allows us to move forward. So, we'll have. We're going to give some time for getting the videos up, and we're not there yet. So, we'll just go through whatever we have, and then we'll come back and see if we have to rearrange. But move to approve the agenda.
Moved.
Second.
Thank you. And Allegretti. And all those in favor, aye.
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 Minutes from January 19. It's been that long, guys. Any questions, comments? It's been a while, but I think that we're continuing a couple of those issues. So, all right. Motion to approve agenda minutes.
I'd move to approve the minutes of January 19th.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Sorry, this is 23, not 22.
It's 23.
Okay,
So thank you. You motioned it correctly.
okay.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. So, public input, we don't have anybody today, so we've crossed them through item 4. Officers report.
Currently, I'm just working on the appeals hearing. You were sent a doodle poll, I believe last week or the week prior, asking you to record your availability for 5 different dates. Some have not completed that at this time, but I do have a paper copy that if you need to look at it, I can give you that and we can fill it in tonight. And in that way, we can put those, get those dates on the calendar. Reminder for the, to volunteer for the Jetty Roads Day. If you haven't, it's fast approaching, Saturday, June 24, 12 to 4. And then we've completed the first hearing on May 10, and the next one is scheduled for June 2nd at 6 p.m. And again, with the doodle poll, we'll have an additional 2 more dates selected, which I can report next time.
Actually, related to things to do outreach, once the market starts, there's, sometimes 500-600 people there a week. So, I don't know if you have any dates that the office is being represented or not.
Not at this time.
Okay.
Is there a city tent there?
Yes,
I believe so.
there always is right at the
Oh, okay.
entrance. So
Oh, okay. So
that's a place we could land.
can just,
Yeah.
We can request a table if we wanted to have an individual table for the
okay.
committee. I just haven't had an opportunity because the other side of the house, I've been having to do heavy recruitment for that side, the Human Relations Commission. And so I've been working on that, trying to get that one staffed or manned or filled.
Find that
Filled.
tabling is more fun in twos,
Yeah.
right? Are you guys game for going on a Saturday, a couple of hours?
Yeah, excuse me,
I
yeah,
could
depending
probably
on the
do
Saturday,
one.
for sure, if you could send around some dates that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we'll put all the Saturdays, click off, and when we have 2, those will be active. And then those 2 will show. We'll ask Katrina to choose a couple and Ashley. And I think if we cover a few Saturdays, it's funny, the times that I've been to outreach of that type, maybe 4 or 5 people in the whole hour or 2, but they don't know about us. And
it's-
so,
right.
they will reach 2 and whatever happens, so.
I mean, I agree that would be a better use of, I went to a couple outreach things last year, the Jetty Roads Day and the Fire Safety Family Day, and those were great fun to be there, but I felt like people were there to have a good time, and while I was there to talk about CPRB, people were kind, but they clearly wanted to do other things. Whereas at the market, I think people are used to getting information, going there
They
to get.
stroll through,
Right.
yeah, all right. So we'll do that. We'll put together a calendar to pass around electronically and pick a couple. Okay, that's
Chair?
good.
Chair Diaz, are you asking for a doodle poll? Do you want me to put together a doodle poll?
No, I'm gonna put together something else poll that we can each, there's like volunteer signups where there's,
Okay.
where we can get 2 slots, and
No
I'll
problem.
take care of it.
Okay.
So, good. Unfinished business, actually, we rolled over because we're making some decisions. So we talked about several things on unfinished business before, but we rolled them over to new business. So we'll start going through there. Luckily, then, we're on 7. Hold it here. Oh, you have it too? Okay. So we'll go through ABC, and then by then, hopefully, we'll have the videos ready to do for the tasers. And I didn't get your name, sorry, officer. Lieutenant Smizer. I know your name a lot. I just didn't remember your face, so. There we go. And if I put my glasses, it'll be even better, okay? Thank you for being here. All right, we have on 7A, well, the things are kind of related, but we need to process them individually, so maybe we can take a vote. We have appeals review process, and then we have overview of pending appeals, the future, the backlogs that we'd like to do before we get to tasers. Appeals review process, we just had another hearing last week, was it? The week before,
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, and it was a marathon. We did like from 6 to 10:30.
Yep.
Yeah. But we handled several cases, and I think that we got through quite well. It felt faster. 4 cases in 4 hours is probably a better pace than we've done before. But it still leaves us with a lot of cases, and so today will be, I'd want to hear ideas as to where we've been and if we need to do anything. But as far as the process, we also have now experience as to doing them all together. The whole group has done, and one of the things that we're working on that I hope to finish is a recommendations for ordinance changes based on our experience. It's one thing to talk about the theoretical, and then the other one is what can they do to make it easier for us so we have room for decisions. And therefore, to make the appeals be as efficient as both parties, usually city versus resident, to make it, keep it fair, but have it go smoother. So this item that I put there so that you send me whatever thoughts you have of that, or unless you want to discuss things that you wish could have gone better last 2 weeks ago when we had the session.
I thought it went well, but I also certainly support the proposal that we put forward to batch similar appeals.
Yeah.
The last appeal hearing was, well, it's green, can you not hear me?
I don't think it is, Peggy.
Is that not, does it always look,
There you
you
go,
know,
yeah.
it's funny from this angle, it always looks green, but I can see it's greener now.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry about that.
It's always
Just talking-
greener when it's further.
Yeah, I guess that's
Or
true.
if you want to, actually, we'll light this one up, and in any way
I'm
you
kind of
talk,
between
you'll be
each two.
fine.
Be in stereo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. But the last appeal hearing, we had decided those were 4 kind of distinct appeals, and so we handled them that way.
Yeah.
But I was also reminded that, as we just said, there was 4 appeals in 4.5 hours. I mean, it is a very time-consuming process. When they have to be dealt with individually, of course, we need to do that. But I very much support our decision to batch similar appeals to address the backlog.
Yeah.
both as a way of moving ahead and,
Well, you're moving on to B, which is the good thing that we did. Last meeting, as we approved those minutes, we talked about batching them. You had prepared a list in your categories. We distributed them all to do a cross-check, and that we agreed with the categorization of them. And then by February, we could identify if we disagreed. We didn't, and so that's why we had the hearing under those four, not exceptional, but very individual cases. But then we have two sets of categorized hearings or appeals that we are going to put together for two different sessions. There are more appeals than we normally handle, but I think the proposal, if I recall correctly, is to discuss the criteria at our hearing for that day so that we can have on the table the discussion of how we will handle certain questions, get informed if there is a law that applies in that, so that when we get to being closed door handling the appeals, each one is handled individually, but with the information and criteria that we talked about openly. Is that what you guys recall?
right, it's still unclear to me exactly how that will proceed. I know we talked about that we would group the appeals, and that the city attorney's office said that each appeal must receive a standalone vote, but we did not need to go through the process of, evidential hearing from every party as we traditionally do in these similar cased appeals.
Good, I'm glad we're talking about it. I think that the attorney said that each one must have a separate decision, a separate disposition. Besides that, I don't recall them saying that how our method would change. I think that's for us to decide, as long as each one gets a separate vote.
As long as it complies with the ordinance, I mean, how we handle them is, we can decide that, and if.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we went through the list, and I think we picked out the ones that we thought should get their own separate hearing, and we've done those.
We did that last time, yeah.
Right, we did that last time, so, it's gone through enough pairs of eyes to handle it the way that we're going to handle it next week.
So for me then, the pending issue is, what do we decide as we discuss, as we develop the criteria? And then it seems to me like we're required a hearing closed door, but I may be misreading it.
You would still do the same process that you do. I think the individual complaint or appeal, you wouldn't say, okay, city side, appellant side, okay, we're done.
Right.
You can take them as a collective if they're all similar in
Right.
the way you've bundled them. You can talk about them all at once rather than one at a time. But when you go to make your decisions, they had to be individualized decisions.
Okay, so I think I'm hearing then that we discuss criteria openly, we go into closed meeting to hear out the cases, we apply the criteria as each member of the board thinks, and then we go in open meeting to vote on them. The procedure that happens in closed door has been that the appellant expresses their side, then the city expresses their side, we discuss, and then we move on to the next one. I think in this last hearing date, we did that, even though several of them were overlapping. But we managed to especially arrange them and sequence them so that in the overlap, we didn't have to rehear the story and redo it. I'm imagining, and I have not seen, because I didn't reread all of them in the categories, I only got a subset. But it seems to me that we've already sent the letter for the next batch. So if we all read them, we may suggest at the beginning of that meeting to resequence them. That would be the only change that we ought to entertain then at the beginning. If there are some that are related beyond the topic, then we should suggest which one goes next to the others as we consider them, okay?
Right.
But other than that, it'll be as we normally do an appeal. We go into closed session, bring up the topic or the number. The appellant and the city will speak. We are anticipating then that both the expression time and our decision time will be shorter because we will already have discussed generally our criteria. Is that?
And I believe you received the entire packet for the next appeal hearing. You received that today. It might be worth looking at it now, and if you want to switch things around, we could possibly put them in that order if you need be. But however, time would be of the essence.
Yeah. Let me take that comment into saying, how about we all go through our packets, and if we have any changes, put them forward at the beginning of the meeting. Because right now, we would get into too much detail that it's not as relevant for today, all right?
Okay.
Okay, everybody reads their packets and brings their agenda if you want to change the order. Okay, that's as to that batch, and then the meeting after that, we'll do the next batch, which will cover a good portion of our pending appeals of our backlog itself for those past ones. Now, I'm moving on to 7C to see if this works and if we have any ideas to prevent the backlogs in the future. There is one pending item, Peggy, that you had brought forward at the last meeting that I put this item for sure, and then you validated it, that we should vote on as to what that change is. And I'm not going to ask you to remember, but if you do.
A change going forward?
Going
not
forward,
just on
yeah.
dispatching process? Well, yeah, I mean, actually, there was, I'd asked if we could sort of triage complaints to separate, basically formalize the process we're doing right now, which is separate out complaints that identify administrative process shortcomings
Yeah.
from other complaints, which is, and secondly, to consider language that recognizes repeat requests from the same person or voluminous requests, much as it appears in the FOIA Act. The FOIA Act acknowledges, adjusts the timeline, gives greater time to respond when there's been a certain number of requests in a designated period of time. And so that was my suggestion. Could we put something in place in our ordinance that also acknowledges the additional time when there are repeat requests from the same person, akin to FOIA? I mean, it's very much like the language in the FOIA Act.
That would be an ordinance change,
Yeah,
so,
Yeah.
I mean,
and I think, yeah, the triaging might also need to be put into the ordinance.
So so they are two separate items. We've discussed triage for a long time as to how to do it, especially because we ended up, when we got backlogged, it was a result of a discussion in which we triaged like 40 of them with the city and with the previous chair, and I was there, and they decided to include everything. But the one thing that they did not follow, to err on the side of caution, was to, even when it didn't appear to be a regular complaint against a sworn officer, they still put it in. And that's how we ended up with so many appeals. On the other hand, if we codify then that, even if we were codified to say when they come in, they get assigned as to whether we have, I don't know what the right word is, it's not jurisdiction, but if it falls under us, because it meets these requisites, then we do take it. Otherwise, it goes back to Carla and the city to say what it is. And I'll give you an example. There were several complaints that made it to this list that were not against sworn officers, and in some cases, they were not against even the police department. But there was no other way to receive complaints. At this point, then, the city has a way to take complaints. I don't know, but that's on them. All I know is that I think what you're asking for is that we choose and triage them as they come in, and we accept which ones are ours and which ones are not ours,
Right.
right? So that language needs to be written, the triage language, and then the repeat language. In FOIA, they put dates on it, and they do quite a bit of, I almost feel like this needs to be written and then brought before the board rather than discussed fully here since from scratch. Right?
I'm just hesitant of having it match too close to FOIA, because we've had FOIA issues tried to be brought before
And we've had to
this
reject
board, and
those.
we've had to reject, I know it's a different topic, but I would be concerned if the language mirrored too closely to FOIA, because I think we want to keep as far away from this being a FOIA board or having FOIA review as possible.
So can I suggest the goals for arranging some language for ordinance? I'm looking for something that is fair, that remains fair for complainant and city, but that it increases our efficiency. Both in, if we have to batch, or if there is somebody that brings on several of them, that we write language that increases the efficiency of what we've had, because otherwise, we will be here for a very, very long time. And that efficiency might include language for batching or other solutions for how do we handle many cases at once. Okay? Any other goals in what we're doing, Peggy, since you had brought this up a little while ago? I think that's what you were responding to, is just a,
Right. Acknowledging the additional time when there's, I mean, I had also brought up, I think it would be, I don't know that this would be in the ordinance, but I think it would be very beneficial to the public to have a sense of the costs involved in processing an appeal, the amount of staff time, paperwork, postage, copying that goes into each, addressing each appeal, so it's clear of the financial cost as well as the time cost, I mean, which isn't a financial cost. That was the third thing I talked to you about, but
Yeah.
I think that's.
well,
that
I
takes
think
more
that's
time,
the
but-
source of it. There's a lot of resources involved in bringing up an appeal.
Right.
We have not reneged on any of those. Everybody's been in agreement that we plow through until it ends, but it has then. So I'm gonna put it as a consideration, maybe not as ordinance, but
Maybe as part of the annual report down the road, that be included, but that does take some, I mean, obviously, tracking, recording on the part of staff, but I think that would be a worthwhile goal at some point, to include that in annual reports.
so let me put this, Carla, on our Wednesday's agenda when we talk as to how do we quantify resources.
Is any other board doing that?
That's you guys.
Do we know if any other board does something like that?
I only staff 2 boards, and the other board that I staff, we are not currently doing that.
Okay.
Might be a question to bring up as you go along, and then we'll discuss it on the Wednesday meeting to see how we might highlight that fact. And maybe the annual report is the place to put it, so that it doesn't take, it's not the priority. For me, the fairness in handling the case is the priority, but doing it better is what we're talking about, right? Okay. All right, so that gives us then how we're gonna do the pending appeals and how we're gonna do, a proposal to include in our proposals to the ordinance changes. We'll probably consider this as a side work. We'll include it with those things that are being proposed to the council which means the city will also agree with us. We'll have to discuss it with them as to how to, what do we put forward for the ordinance change when it comes to this. And then from there, language will be derived that is more concise than the purposes. Okay? All right. Anything else on appeals then? All right. Let's hope that then this transparency enables us to get any feedback from the public as it comes out, and you can write us directly. All right. So that's 7A, B, and C. We're back then to 7D, which is our Taser Reviews. As an introduction, a long time ago, now I forget the couple of years that it's been, the 4 or 5 years when we got tasers, we were involved with the decision of council delegated to us and to the deputy chief probably to write the rules about tasers once the council approved about purchasing them. The form that we presently use was co-written together. I remember the goal was keep it to 1 page, and the other one for us was let's have enough info that we can make decisions on them. The first year tasers were reviewed, all of the tasers, unholstering were reviewed. We went through many, and then we ended up a report, actually like 2 years after the fact, in which we analyzed and said this was a good thing. But then before this board, in one of our sessions, we voted to not review every single upholstering or unholstering, and partly because the tasers at the beginning were the only camera in a situation. So it was a recording. And often, because of the rules we set up, the taser was pointing down and we could hear an audio of the presence of a police officer. That got very tedious. In this room, we looked at the screen and we heard what was going on, but it was just the floor. So we voted to say, let's only do discharges. They're less frequent in our kind of town. It doesn't happen very often. And by now, we had body cameras. And so we didn't need the camera on the tasers. So that's what we did. We voted for that. It is another pending change for the council to change, but we voted that was a more efficient way to do it. And so today we are reviewing the last time that at the time Deputy Chief Searles was here, we agreed that at the next meeting that we had, we would go over all the discharges that we had and that were ready and prepared for, so we could analyze them. The other thing that we have over time learned about reviewing tasers has been that while we're looking at them individually, we're looking for lessons learned and to see if any policies need to be changed about the usage of tasers. We don't necessarily consider each one as to appropriate behavior, but we're looking to what do we learn from the usage of those days so that we can put together, if any, changes to forward onto the chief. I guess we do have a chief. It's a temporary chief, but it's a chief. And so actually that's another thing for our report, to include in our report anything that we may have concluded on tasers, because otherwise it's easy to get lost in the recordings what actually was a lesson learned. So today we'll be going over several tasers and to both then see what happened and learn what might have happened and then what might be or not sufficient in the policies of the usage. And to be completely open, I was not happy for tasers before it happened, but once I learned what the options were, it is a viable option. given that there are many times you just, the alternative is lethal force, and I could not vote for that. So anyway, so I became a supporter of Taser usage whenever it was a necessary thing. And if you will, I changed my mind, and I've learned quite a bit since. But the more we watch, the more we learn, and we are here to ask questions about what happened and how it was handled. So any other questions, comments as an intro? All right, let's just then enumerate how we're gonna go through them, both for managing the expectation and the timing of them. So we have we have 4 we're considering today? Yes, I believe so. Lieutenant? Yeah, so we'll go through them and then take notes, ask questions, but then we'll discuss at the end after them all what implications they might have for us. Okay? Time is yours for the first one.
Okay, well, since we're on the record, I suppose I'll introduce myself. My name's Dave Smizer. I'm a lieutenant with the
Thank you.
Urbana Police Department, just shy of 22 years. Current role is that of lieutenant in the patrol division. I oversee 2nd and 3rd shift. So the officers that work at night in uniform. Previous to that, I spent a lot of time in my career in investigations in various roles. Came back to the patrol division. I oversee the use of force committee on the department. I've got training and experience in use of force. And I oversee the tasers as they are rolled out within the department from more of an administrative stance than anything. This is the first time I've been asked to come before the board to talk about these, so I already understand that I didn't bring the video that I should have brought, or I know that you were all afforded the opportunity previously to watch the video, but you don't bring it with you. You just watch it wherever you might be.
Yes. we
And
do.
so if I am called to do this again in the future, I will learn. I will bring what Carla was able to get for me for these videos. Is there a preference in how you would like to go through these?
So I think maybe we can take the numbers, see if there's any questions already, and then burrow down to the level of answering any of those questions. For the public, we, through the portal, get copies of the video, copies of the reports that the officers write, not only for the Taser usage, but for reports from squad cars, officers, or other people that are called into the scene. I was very pleased that at this time, we also got paperwork from booking somebody to when the medical personnel were called. It fills in a lot of the details of what actually happened.
Redacted copies of the reports.
That's, yes. In fact, I don't remember, yeah, these are all redacted. We have had we have had here sometimes video is called redacted too when they blur the faces.
Yeah.
So that they can be played over the air as needed and no privacy is released. The public doesn't get to see the reports to the detail that we get them, but we're open to discussing them without the names, usually because they're redacted. In almost every other situation that we do the CPRB, there are 2 copies. There's the full copy that we get to see, and then there's a redacted copy that is available for FOIA or whatever else. But for these cameras, we usually have redacted anything because it is going out on YouTube, for the world, so we do. So we can just start with 5736 for questions, and then maybe a brief discussion of what it entailed and In most cases, I think the report says, at least two of the officers that I read today were very clear. I pulled it because for this purpose, or, I think it's in the spirit of the Taser report too. So maybe if there's no questions, or if there's questions, then we look at the Taser report and derive a discussion based on it. And if we want more details, we can look, including the video. Okay? Is that okay with everybody?
Sure.
Okay. So I have to open up my portal to see
You have-
those papers.
I do have a question, and,
Go.
you have to help. If you look at the report, it won't be broadcast over the monitors, will it?
No, well, at least our computers are not connected to the system in that way.
Okay.
So we get to
Broadcasting
see
what
and
he's
we'll get to
showing.
see together.
Being broadcast what he's showing, so that's what I was
That's right.
concerned about.
This one, though?
Yeah, so you have to be careful on what you show, just make sure it follows the rules of privacy. But give me 1 or 2 minutes to make sure that my connection is still alive, because it tends to kick us out. So I first click something and see if it works.
Carla did adjust that, because I had brought to her attention that you get kicked out of the portal after 15 minutes, which does also slow down the process. And she said she was able to change that level so that you could stay on it for 60 minutes, the portal. Because, when you're looking at a video, it's often for more than 15 minutes.
Right.
And you go back and you're off the
Well, the
system.
other thing that came up on the exchange was that when you're watching a video, the system is not counting you as active. So you have to click on something else to keep your activity up.
Right. And
Which,
now we have a longer period of time to remain inactive, which.
and
helps.
for the public, not only did we have a portal, but the way the system is now, all our interactions we use city mails, which everything is there for a FOIA. But to log on, it sends you, a third system, your phone, something, you have to keep logging on, and it's a little procedure every time we log on from the outside. But it's okay. We can do it. Just takes longer.
It's two-step authentication to ensure that it's you that's logging on, and for security for the system, the city system.
Yeah, it still bugs, whether it's here or Google or whoever else does it, and they don't make it easy for us, so let me just log on, because I've been kicked out. Okay, our portal also keeps a log of all the tasers, taser usages. And so, actually, what I don't have is the conventions of, in our folder, BWC number 1 is related to which number?
19, yeah.
U19 7, oh, I see. So 19 is number 1, correct? Well, let's see what happens. Yeah, so I can't see the video anymore still. See what happens to
Yeah,
it when I click
I
it.
know, right, it goes, I know.
So,
Are you down to the bottom, though? Because I thought the videos were at the very bottom. I think those are the 4 videos right there.
okay. But those are U20.
It's
19,
only
17, 16, which has the video up there, but I can't see.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah, I bet the-
so we are on U19, 17, 16, and we can look at, and in fact, I downloaded them. I can see then the police reports, and then I'm looking forward to see Lieutenant, I think that the Taser page is the one I'm looking for. And I think that's redacted enough that it can be projected so that we can all have a focus for discussion.
1716,
Yeah,
you're looking for the video or
just the Taser report.
the report?
It's
Did you
painful.
find that, Tony?
Yeah, I remember this particular case, because we discussed it a while back.
It was, this is an old one, too.
Yeah,
So you're looking for
Well, the Taser report, in this case, we're looking, that's the officers' reports. But we should refresh our minds so we remember what happened that day so that then we can talk about the usage.
so is this the report you're looking, the Taser usage
Yeah,
form?
that's it.
Yeah. So is that
Exactly.
there?
Would you, okay, so U-19-1716, so we're talking 4 years ago, April 13th, 2019, at an apartment complex in Urbana?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. Would you like me to provide a synopsis of what happened?
Yeah,
An unknown offender displayed a handgun in an apartment complex parking lot. While searching for the unknown offender, a male was stopped by officers and then fled on foot, disobeying officers' commands. The male offender was tased and continued to flee. He was eventually stopped by officers and transported to the jail. Are you looking for, what more would you like?
you know, in this case, I think, Tony, this is one that we discussed.
We discussed
off-
this.
Yeah, on camera, and then we came back to it, or we were gonna come back to it.
right. I've pointed out the issues I had with this before, but it was, the video shows the officer that unholstered his taser also had his service weapon in his hand, which is against policy. And there was also a question of whether or not he should have unholstered it based on the policy under, let's see, 304.5.1, fleeing suspect suspected of committing felony involving violence. This is a possession of a handgun, which is not necessarily classified as a violent felony. Possession of a handgun is, I'm not aware of any law or policy that classifies that as the case. So those were my issues, I think.
Yeah, so as I recall the situation, then it was like a two-tiered, something had happened.
I don't think a firearm was actually recovered either.
It wasn't, and they never found it, but this was a suspect and he ran. And
Right.
so the officers thought that he might be the suspect and that he might have the gun. So they chased him across an apartment complex.
Right.
Finally cornered him. He didn't have a handgun. But the taser was discharged as soon as he decided to run.
Right.
Except that it didn't engage, and so he had a hoodie on, and only taser works with two prongs. They both hurt a lot if they both engaged, if they penetrate the skin, but in this case, only one of them did, and the second one didn't. It got caught up in the hoodie. So as he ran, he even says, I felt something, but I thought it might be a bullet, because he never felt the taser discharge. And I think the record shows that the electricity didn't go through him, if I read it correctly. But then when they corner him, as they chase him, he's got a taser on one hand, that's the camera we see, and then the gun on the other. And when the guy gets cornered, gets apprehended, and then there's an interview with him because he feels hurt. So I think in every case when there's a discharge of that type, that they call the medical personnel to make sure that,
Yes, there should be.
Yeah, so can you teach us a little bit about where the rules apply of use of taser under that circumstance, and then and then we'll come back to the gun at the same time.
Where the rules of Taser apply in that circumstance, I believe the officer at the time was operating under the reasonably objective thought that the person fleeing as they are responding to an apartment complex report of a man with a gun, it was a fight, and they provided a description of the subject that was supposedly carrying the gun. They come across this person that fits that description, and as soon as they began speaking with him, he took off running.
Yeah.
The description was male black hoodie, correct? I believe.
Yes, 17, 20 years of age, short hair, birthmark, yeah. That was the description.
Yep.
So when he starts to flee is when they try to tase him,
Right.
and he keeps on running, and they finally catch him several buildings down or something, he gets.
Yes.
But in the meantime, then, from the firing of the taser, which if he's running, that's one way to stop him, if he would have caught. But he doesn't, so he runs, and we see the officer running, and at the time, I guess there was a body cam, that's the camera we're seeing. It's not the taser camera. But then the question was, if he's running, and he's running with a gun and a taser in his hand.
Is that proper protocol? No, it is
Okay,
not.
so the protocol is, when you have a taser, you don't need the gun, or when you have a gun, you don't need the taser, or?
The thought process is the two shouldn't mix in most situations. There's questions of parasympathetic response. You squeeze the trigger on one, you squeeze the trigger on both. Potentially, there's concerns in those instances. That's probably the biggest one. You don't want to confuse one for the other if you have them both out. But, yeah, that would be a real concern.
Okay, so in this case, the officer, we watched the officer have them both, have them both. What happens then as far as procedure when, I mean, I've learned now the adrenaline under such circumstances, especially if I think that somebody has a gun. I'm also now aware of how that just changes how we humans react. But in this case, breaking protocol, what happens to the officer when it's
I'd have to
declared so?
review the video, but it was momentary. And I think this is one of those, I mean, this would be a conversation that I would have as a supervisor to go back after the fact and talk to them and go, what's going on here? What's going through your head? This, this shouldn't happen, to see what they had to say about it. I wasn't involved in this incident or situation. This would have been when I was in investigations. I am not familiar with what did occur regarding any sort of follow-up with this, but yes, this is something that I would definitely want to address with the officer to go, why did this occur? If I recall from reviewing the video, like I said, it was very momentary. Almost one was coming in and one was out. I don't think there was a long overlap, but in perfect situations, you don't want there to be any overlap at all. So that kind of answer that question?
I think so. Mr. Allegretti?
And there was no verbal or visual display before he discharged either. From what I have watched and heard, he's got it out even before he sees the guy running. and then fires it off.
You're watching the video
watching it
right
right
now.
now,
I
yeah.
remember as he turns the corner into the hallway, it's already out.
And he's got the other issue, he's got the handgun and the taser out for a couple seconds. I mean, it only takes a second, not even, to pull the wrong trigger. And I mean, we've seen what happens, at least, in other communities, when you mistake your mistake your handgun for your taser. I mean, there was a very serious case that involved that, and it was, did not have a good outcome. So those are my concerns. I don't think the protocol was followed. I'm also concerned that this was brought up, I believe, over a year ago with Deputy Searles when we discussed this. I would have liked to at least seen some sort of follow-up with the officer, if he's still on the force, I don't know, and address this, because I still have questions as to whether or not the taser should have even been displayed, because, again, crime of violence, I've not seen a definition that meets possession of a handgun as a crime of violence. People possess handguns all the time. Some of them are allowed to do that. Some of them are not. But even if they are not, I don't think it's a crime of violence, and this policy specifically says that's what's required. It's also further concerning that no one actually ever saw the gun. We have a very generic description responding to a complex where hundreds of people live. I'm sure there were more than one young black man with a black hoodie on who has reason to run from the police, unfortunately. That's just the times that we live in. And this could have gone horribly wrong. I'm glad it didn't. But I think if the procedures would have been followed, we would not even be discussing it. So that's my concern here.
I hear what you're saying. The policy does say the taser is intended to control a violent or potentially violent individual. You can make a strong argument that this was a potentially violent individual based on the...
Well, it's for a crime of violence. So the call was man with handgun, not, discharge or an active fight. So I think, I think that's where there's an issue with the policy. I mean, I don't think it's unclear at all. If it's crime of violence, someone with a handgun is not a violent crime.
Are you talking about the taser policy?
Yes, yeah. I'm talking about 30451. Let's see. Officers are authorized to use taser on a fleeing suspect wanted or suspected of committing a felony involving violence. So, again, the call out was subject with armed subject. That possession of a handgun alone is not a crime of violence. This guy's running with a handgun. I don't think the policy applies here.
Armed subject in addition to being the report of a fight.
Right, but there was no, when
The fight
officers show up,
The
there's
fight
no
could be
fight.
looked at as a crime of violence.
I don't think anyone reported, no one put this guy with the fight. I think there was no active fight at the time.
They were dispatched to the apartment complex on the report of a fight. Metcat advised there were 5 males and 1 female trying to fight the reporting person's daughter. The suspects were described as black males, so on and so forth.
Right, but I don't think they had enough information that put this person as being involved in the fight. I mean, we have a very generic description. Possession of a handgun, again, is not a crime of violence. Or at least I've not seen that I don't think you can say that possession of a handgun is a violent crime. If there was a report of a gun being discharged, I think you've got a very different story here. And again, I mean, we've hashed this out before.
Yeah, we've hashed it before. So for me, the recommendations for as we go forward is, one, it would be nice to know what happened to the officer when he breaks protocol in this case, or in in forthcoming cases? Because that's one of the things that people just are left to wonder. And I know that there's a use of violence committee and that some of it is very sensitive, but since we get no feedback when we come to this kind of situation, it leaves a gap of information that did anything happen to the officer? You know, we don't know.
And it doesn't have to be a reprimand or some sort of penalty, just, you know, hey, look, you know, or some report, officer was talked to, they addressed the issue, or maybe it was used as a training material, like, you
Yeah.
know, everyone was, I don't know how they do the trainings, but
Yeah, there
You
was a
know,
discussion
there
about
was a
the use
discussion.
of
I
something.
can say pretty, with pretty reasonable certainty, although I don't know specifically, again, I wasn't involved in this case, but all of those things that you are talking about do happen, they do happen quite frequently.
but involving actual occurrences, or is it just a hypothetical situation?
Both.
Okay.
Both, but they do involve actual occurrences. Speaking from my position as the use of force committee administrator, many of our recommendations when we review uses of force that we push back to the department, to the officer, to that officer's direct supervisor are retraining. Go over this with them. This is what we saw. This is, a lot of the times, it's very good. Things worked out very well, followed policy, no problems. The more issues that we see, that we address are, we didn't like this. Something was not good here. You might have done something that we deem to be unsafe. And so the direct supervisor will meet with that officer to go over that, to review it with them. So we do send the ones that we see back for review, retraining. Like, it can run the gamut from
Sure.
that to, oh, I suppose if it was potentially bad enough, up through termination. I mean,
It can
it's,
happen. So for me, in this case, we hashed that out, we put it forward, we still don't know what might have happened. We know what might be irregular. There is one other, if it's okay with you guys, I'd like to move on to one more learning that we had over this case. Is that okay?
Sure.
And that was this. It was around this time, after 19th of this case, that we needed that information of what the 911 call contains. It was at that time that we started to discuss, so what do the police officers get when they walk into a situation like this? And we learned at our last meeting that MedCat has changed, the 911 system has changed, such that before there was, you got what you got at the beginning and then you moved in. Man with a gun, black hoodie, African-American male. Now it seems to be that the system actually accumulates comments as they're coming in, but that is an important piece of information for us on decisions on, not only on tasers, but in other cases, because it does have a bearing. What did the officer know when he walked in, when she walked in? Because if all they got is gun, it changes the nature of it. It also changes it for me because, I'll just say it like this, because I have friends that know that if the word gun is mentioned in the call, the officer are gonna show up faster than if it's just, there's a fight on the parking lot, right? And so people learn that. The unfortunate thing is, when you make a call like that, it has implications as to what the officers get and how they might approach the situation. So it's a learning for everybody that what you say matters. But for me, for our meetings, it would be very nice if we did get, what is it that the officer got? Information.
Ricardo, are you saying people will report, I think someone may have a gun in order to get the police out faster? Is that what
Yes.
you- Okay.
Yes.
I would agree with that. It does happen.
Yeah.
But how do you parse out the ones
No,
that
right,
are
how do
true
you,
and the
how do
ones
you
that
do
aren't?
that?
And you can't.
Yeah.
Because the minute you don't respond to that and take it as seriously, it's the one you don't show up and there's actually a firearm and it
Yeah.
becomes a problem.
And I had that explained to me by a friend who did. And she says, no, you just gotta tell them there's a gun. That's the way to get them here. And I was like, well, that's new to me. I wouldn't, that had occurred to me, but if it was in her mind, she knows what the game is, and
Yeah.
yeah, so anyway. So that's a learning for me. And we were discussing on how to get the MedCat into our portal. And I don't know whether we've concluded as to how to make that part of the report. I think the consultation was gonna go back to police as to what it is. Because it's one thing for the officers had, as in this case, the running narrative of that's what they thought they were walking into, and it's a heck of a difference to get it from this is what 911 sent them. So if it were part of the report, we would all have better info 3 years, 2 years after the fact, whenever we look at it. So, anyway, so that's a learning and maybe a homework item to come back to. All right? All right. Is it okay if we leave this case then? All right. Thank you. That was 19, 17, 16. And if we go to the others, then we can go back to discussions. So, place myself again. I don't know what's next on your directory, but we're looking
I
at
don't know that
20, 57, 36? I think that's the
57,
lowest,
36,
no?
yes, I think we're ready for that one.
There's a 2014-82 if we're going in,
That's right, if we're going,
just in
psych-
report
yeah.
order.
1482
1482.
Yeah.
in the year 20, so we're only 2 years behind on this one. Or it happened in 2 years ago. Yeah, I haven't been able to download them, no matter what I do. We have to watch them in that little window.
Yeah, going forward, it would be great to get the video
You wanna put that on the tech?
if we can
People.
download. I'm sure there's just a setting, like, don't allow them to download video files or something like
Yeah.
that. Because you can download the PDFs, no problem.
No, but we've tried, and we can't
you can't
download them, so
download
we
I
can
try
then-
and download it, and it says it's an HTML file, and it's like two megabits, and it's not the video, and
Yeah, it's like a reference to the page, but we
Right.
cannot allow to actually download the video. And,
if the player would get better, then we wouldn't need to
Yeah.
do it, but if that
the
can't be
built-in
done.
player is as minimal as it could be, you can
Yeah.
only press one button on it.
So I'm trying, how were you able to,
Well, I struggled through what they're describing. I just realized, didn't think I could go back and stop it, and I got it in that little window, and,
but you were able to view it?
You can press play, we can view it,
yeah.
but we
you
can't stop it, we can't accelerate it, we can't jump.
Right.
You can only play forward, and you can't go backwards. If you miss that, you
So-
missed it.
You know, sometimes there's a lot of lead time that's not relevant, and you have to kind of sit through that until you get to the, so if you can,
What,
Difference between something on TV, on the air, it comes and goes forever, or a DVR where you can go back and forth. And in our case, I think we need a DVR.
I will ask for my own knowledge.
Okay.
Would you prefer that when I work on redacting these in the future, shrinking them down to the relevant portion? I questioned whether you wanted to see it all for purposes of being able to see it all, except most of the times it's 34 minutes and 17 up front, a minute and a half of action, and 15 waiting on.
So that it minimizes your work and we don't contradict ourselves. I was sitting on a chair over there the day we said, can we have more context, and we'll jump to it when we need to. And back then, we had videos with more capacity. But in this case, we either get the full, just control, and then doesn't matter, because we can jump to that section. As long as you marked it and it said, discharge at 17:32, then we can go to the discharge. If we want to catch something before, that's fine. It's usually not very relevant, but
So you want me to leave it as is?
as
Redact
long
the
as they
entire
can solve
file?
the video problem.
Okay, I got, to be determined, maybe in the future, if the video problem can't be solved, I can
Then,
shrink it
yeah.
down.
Because
Okay.
we realize it's work. And then you're running the risk of that I add enough, right?
That was my concern as I'm going through it. I certainly don't want to seem like I'm
Yeah,
taking out pieces that are relevant to try
Yeah.
and make it look a certain way, but the fact of the matter is, almost all of these are
They're huge.
30-plus minutes of mostly waiting for EMTs to show up to check
Yeah.
on someone after the fact.
And actually, I learned that at least the squad cars, I don't know if the body cams does, it starts recording before they actually press record.
They all have a 30-second head start.
Yeah,
So they're always recording, but it will roll off until someone either activates the lights in the car or activates the body cam,
Yeah.
at which point it will start from 30 seconds prior. That's why that first 30 seconds has no audio. It's not containing audio up until the point when someone actively engages the system.
yeah.
So,
That was good to learn,
I
because
didn't
then you
realize
know.
that, yeah.
Yeah, those squad cars can see so much. To the public, know that the cars can hear a lot, a block away, as I remember, so, anyway. Okay, so shall we talk through this one? We're gonna press play on our side just to remind ourselves. Turned off the sound on purpose. But again, I can't accelerate, so this is just to prime ourselves to it. Shall we go to the Taser review, to the Taser page? That will give us a summary of it. Up to it, if I go, well, this is just to recall the video.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
let's go back to the Taser usage page to remember the details. At least for me, I'm always, 1482, here it is. Comes. At the very bottom. So the Taser usage form is what we call it.
Yeah.
Okay. We were, we
Oh, you're
did,
just reading
we
this,
did,
okay.
but it's the one in the
Okay.
park?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but I had to jump to it to come to this, download. Because it is a pain to jump back and forth. Anyway, any questions, or shall we go through just the very minor, a quick, so we have it on record? He did get tased. What was the situation?
Maybe, yeah, Lieutenant, can we get the synopsis like you did before?
Sure. So this was an incident involving two family members. I don't know how. I don't see any reason why I couldn't tell you. Victim and offender are mother and son. The offender battered his mother. The offender had a knife in his hand and swung it at her as if he was going to stab her. He took her phone while she was attempting to call 911 and threw the phone. As he is walking down the street, officers get out with him. They began speaking with him. They spend a good deal of time getting several officers on scene, getting around him, trying to talk to him. Having previously had encounters with him, they were somewhat familiar with him. They eventually get to the point where they claim, they explain to him, "You're going to have to come with us." And he says, "No, I'm not," and begins walking. Officers had essentially encircled him at that point, and once he begins trying to walk through the circle is when the officer behind him tased him. And it was partial success. One probe stuck, one probe might have made minimal contact momentarily. It was enough to take him to the ground. Officers were able to get in, handcuff him, and take him into custody with no, I believe with no further injury to anyone.
Blood, no anything.
The only, I don't know, I believe this was the incident where this occurred outside the home when he was attacking his mother, and a neighbor actually came across the street with a bat to scare him away, tell him to get off of her. So that's the gist of it. Do you have any more? Do you like any more explanation?
So was he armed with the knife at the time he was surrounded? Is that?
He was not, he dropped the knife initially before, see if I can find it in the report. So, when officers were speaking to her, she had several large bruises on her, but explained that that was from him punching her repeatedly in the face in a previous incident days before. When they found him, he did initially drop the knife that he was carrying a knife in his right hand. He was told to drop the knife, he complied. But then as they tried to speak with him further, they got to the point where they said, well, we're gonna take you into custody, and he said no, and tried to walk through them, and at which point the taser was deployed.
And this is a situation where they didn't tell him that he could get tasered. They were using this to, what the theory or the idea was, would tase him by surprise.
Yes.
Right. And what was that based on? Why did they do that, as opposed to announce?
I would suspect it was the element of surprise, knowing the history of them having dealt with him, the history of what they had learned on that day, that he was somewhat easy to provoke,
Mm-hmm.
that they would lose the advantage of surprise if they would have declared to him what they were going to do up to that point, which the way it went down, even though the taser didn't discharge completely, I would say that it worked, because it did catch him off guard. It did drop him to the ground. They were able to immediately rush in, take him into custody with no injury to anyone else involved.
Tony, I know that you have much more knowledge as to the violence, as you mentioned in the other one, is it a crime? I know that one of the discussions that we had as we were setting forth the rules of usage was, so what are the alternatives? If the officer in a situation, I remember we had a longest discussion on using the taser as a threat versus using it as one of the tools to get something done when there is a violence. So don't use it as a threat. If you're gonna pull it out, you might as well know what you're gonna need it for.
Right.
Right? So the threat versus the actual announcement is, for me, in conflict, because when you announce it,
Right.
you're essentially threatening.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the call is for domestic battery, so it's obviously a violent crime. He's not running anywhere. It doesn't seem like it, so I mean, that's not really applicable. Based on the way the policy is written, I mean, you can always argue it shouldn't, you know, we don't have to display or warn because of officer safety. But, you know, would he have complied if they just displayed or said, hey, look, we're gonna tase you? You know, I guess I don't, I'm wondering if, and I think, I remember the training, we saw a case similar to this where there was a person having some sort of mental health issue and the officer displayed it and said, look, I don't want to use this, something to that effect, and the guy complied. You know, you can distinguish this case. The officers on scene were apparently familiar with this guy. They may have known that's not going to work. So, you know, it's, I don't see as much problem with it. I like to see they at least display or maybe not even, maybe just say, look, if you don't come with us, we may have to tase you, not even motioning that they're going to use the taser. Just as like, hey, look, this is may how this goes down. But I would feel better if the verbal and visual warnings were done more often than they're not. And maybe they are because we're not reviewing all of these. It's the ones we've seen, we tend to see ones that they cut right to using the taser. And I guess that's, maybe we have a skewed sample because we don't see the ones that are.
Do you have access to I believe you do have access to the display reports?
I think we do, yeah.
There's quite a few more display reports than there are discharge reports. It's
Display and then compliance, you're saying?
display and compliance.
Yeah.
So the way we break them down is to display, discharge. Display is, I pull it out, I show it to you.
Yeah.
I might make a verbal, statement, get on the ground or I'm gonna tase you.
Right.
And it works.
Yeah, I've seen those,
But-
yeah.
So there's a lot more of those than the actual discharge where the officer pulls the trigger and the probes shoot out. So,
I guess, so are there some where there's display and then non-compliance and then discharge?
yes, I believe that would be a fair statement. I would say that a lot of displays do work. It's kind of a mixed bag, a double-edged sword. A double-edged sword. You could display to someone and they go, I don't care, in probably coarser terms than that, and it doesn't work at all. There have been multiple instances in the department where you do display it, get on the ground or I'm going to tase you, and they go, I don't want any of that, and they get on the ground. And I'm sure there have probably been, be careful with my words here, I don't want to say probably have been, I'm almost certain there have been instances where a display, because of someone's mental state or level of intoxication, does no good.
I just,
We've seen those.
those are the situations though where, you have someone who's under the influence of drugs, alcohol, whatever, combined with the taser probe running through their body. That's when this less lethal form of weapon becomes that's when these things become less lethal and they turn into lethal.
Any level of force used, I mean, that potential does exist.
Sure, it exists.
It's absolutely something that needs to be, I mean, I think that's why we look at every.
I would be curious to see if, and I think Champaign's policy is similar, and I don't know if there's a department that has a policy that requires either a verbal or a visual an announcement or display, and is there a significant difference in, are officers getting more hurt when they're doing this? Are they, because they've lost that element of surprise?
I'm not aware of any research that's been done.
Yeah,
on
right.
that.
I don't know either. I'm just.
And
It just seems like we would reduce the injury to everyone potentially if we say either, look, I'm going to have to tase you if you don't come with us, or display and say, look, we don't want to have to use this. Especially in a situation like this where he's surrounded by like 5 or 6 officers. it would seem like the potential for injury would be less with that many people as opposed to a one-on-one or a two-on-one, but
Potential for injury for whom?
to everyone.
Maybe.
Right.
It depends on who's involved and
Oh,
under
right, I
what
mean,
threat,
it's not
so.
Superman, but, I mean, I guess I think given the opportunity to comply, I would wonder if there's any statistical significance if
So,
that were the
There may not
policy.
be, and if there's no research, we had to look it up, but for us, Carla, I think it would be interesting for transparency's sake, is just to keep a tally, and make that part of our report. How many discharges there were, how many, displays.
We have those numbers.
That report is in the portal.
It's because I see only the log, I didn't see, but what I'm saying is that might be part of our yearly report, to roll it into that, again, for people to see the difference and ask themselves the same questions, because in any individual instance, unless there's a court and all that, we will have a partial view of what happened. And us reviewing them causes questions to see, could we make sure to head off any problem later on? The fact that the case has already happened, and in this case, 2 years later, we're not gonna influence that situation, but if we kept track enough that people could know that these issues exist. The other thing I get from you guys is, oh shoot, and I lost it here. The thing that impressed me out of this one is it took 2 seconds for him to buckle down, and that was the 2 seconds that they took advantage to put him under the, I suppose that's what's it called, the thingies. Thank you, handcuffs. Because that is the purpose of a taser. In that sense, you paralyze the nervous system. The person is no longer in control to fight unless they're under some kind of influence. But a regular person,
Yeah, I would argue even if they are under some type of influence, unlike pepper spray, that if you have enough fight in you, you can fight through pepper spray, depending on if you're under the influence. The purpose of the taser is not one of pain compliance. It's one to lock up your system. So having been tased, yes, it hurts. It's extremely painful. But pain is not the purpose. The purpose is to get that neuromuscular incapacitation to where the person can't move. And in those 5 seconds, gives those officers time to move in and approach for the handcuffing. So, yes.
yeah. So I suppose a gun would take less time. I mean, if a bullet came out, it takes a fraction of a second. But to me, 2 seconds seems like a pretty good time, because if there was a fight, even with 5 officers around, chances are 1 or 2 blows are not gonna fix it. So anyway, for me, this is one of those cases in which things worked. It may not have been under full violence, but already it wasn't going well if the guy was already with a knife with his mom.
I don't think there's any policy problems here. I'm just saying, as far as proposals, I'd be interested in seeing if it was a requirement that they, or maybe less exception to the verbal or visual display. Would that increase the harm to officers or the individuals, or not? To give that person more of a chance to comply, as opposed to saying, well, officer safety, we had to discharge. Because that usage of that concern, I think, the exception can overtake the rule, and that's what I'm concerned about.
Just to speak on the numbers, I'm certain that the department provides a use of force report to the full council on an annual basis, and those are broken down by types of force used, and our department does consider pistol points, rifle points and taser displays as uses of force and keeps track of those numbers in addition to taser discharges. So I only bring up pistol and rifle points because it's another example that I would lump into taser displays where no actual force was used. It was simply the threat of force to attempt to gain compliance for the person. So you could easily find the numbers for taser displays versus taser discharges in those annual reports.
Yeah, we'll look them up.
Okay.
Might be interesting. All right, can we move on to the next one? Is everyone okay?
Yeah,
All right,
3048.
3048. The report. Off. If you use it often enough, it goes faster. 3048 video. And now I have realized how to do the video.
Yeah.
4 or 5 videos.
Yeah.
One, and the report was. Go to the Taser report first. Okay, 20-3048. I thought we had the video, but which video? Which one is interesting?
I was just reviewing the shorter one.
Okay. As we pick the video, can you give us a synopsis again with,
Yes, I can. I will just say to start, this was not one that I put together. So I will do my best if you have specific questions, but we want to get in the nitty-gritty, well, we'll see.
Yeah.
If you're not satisfied, maybe we could table this one and
this is
go
as
better.
much learning as it is
Yeah.
figuring out what happened so that we can look at policy. At least for me, now they're interesting because these things happened in our town, and whoever watches gets to learn what did happen in general, since we have to protect.
So synopsis for this one would read, police were called after the arrestee was refusing to leave a residence. When police arrived, the arrestee fled out the back door. When he saw police in the backyard, the offender ran back into the residence. Offender resisted arrest by pulling away from officers, striking an officer in the face with his hand, and disarming an officer by taking his baton. A taser was deployed on the arrestee, and he was taken into custody.
And the taser worked. It engaged and connected.
This occurred in July of 2020, yes.
Yeah.
So yes, the taser did connect, it did work.
In the front.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, looking at the Taser report, that's what we see, that the probes went in through to the front. Stuck within it anyway. Darn it. All right, questions, comments? I know this is tedious in a way for everybody, but we don't have a better way of looking through it, so.
It's very informational for me since this is my first time in a Taser review, and while I looked at everything,
Yeah, it's
I
hard
feel
to
like-
match.
Right, I'm kind of,
So my PDFs are kept in a separate window than my videos. Tony was looking at the shortest one, so let me pull
Yeah,
the
it's-
longest one.
I didn't want to turn on the audio, because it's kind of, was this another, was there no visual, no verbal on
I
this one?
believe, according to the report, that the officer yelled, "Taser, taser, taser,"
Okay.
deployed the taser.
And that was after he had the baton? After the suspect had the baton?
Yes.
Okay.
That was after, so. The baton was, the officer was trying to use it.
Taser! He's got a baton, won't let go of it. Let go! Drop it! Drop it! You're gonna get tased. No, I'm gonna stand back.
No! They was beating him up!
He's got his baton, okay?
I seen it though! Stop! He has
Yeah. So as they go into the house, they call it out.
Right,
'Cause
yeah, no.
he's running. Yeah. So in that sense, that fulfills, as we're looking at, it looks like he, you know, I don't know what he was thinking by going back inside. And,
Yeah, I don't,
yeah, I mean, he's logging himself in.
right.
So, in any case, the cause or the content of what happened, I have to tell you, the first time that, the first or second time I did a ride-along, we did a domestic situation. One, as an observer, I was so uncomfortable being there, watching family argue and throw things at each other. And like, how do you get in the middle of that? You know, you may be armed, but it doesn't matter because that's not the level of fight and shouting and ugliness that's happening. It was just such an emotional anger between them that I was like, I'd rather not be here, you know?
That was the word I was going to use. They tend to be quite emotional because you're talking about a lot of anger, a lot of angst, a lot of people that are upset with each other, but there's a connection between them as opposed to maybe you and I who get into an argument at Walgreens over something and we both go our separate ways and never see each other again. These are people you know, love and live with and see every day, but it rises to the level.
Yeah. And somebody, often an observer, is the one that's calling it in because they recognize that this is escalating to a level that is gonna be harmful to somebody. So, and I'll just make one further comment. The thing that bugs me is that we are functioning in a situation in which people are afraid of police officer excessive use of force, and so that plays into, do I call or do I not call? But once they're there, it is an immediate thing for me too, when I get pulled over. I'm like, I don't wanna make the wrong move. And when I see videos of people challenging police and saying, no, I'm not gonna provide my name and stuff like that, I'm like, could I get away with that? I don't know, but I'm not gonna test it, because I'm still very vulnerable because of what I've seen in videos, so.
No, yeah, I mean, this one appeared to be okay. I mean, they gave him ample opportunity, and he still declined to drop the baton. So, I mean, the restraint was good for me. I don't see any issue with the use of force.
the only question I had was, I wasn't sure what the baton referred to. Is that the police officer's baton? I mean,
Yes.
Okay.
It's called a baton at times. It's called an ASP, A-S-P. I believe that might be a
Like
brand.
a nightstick.
A nightstick. We use expandable batons. We haven't carried, we used to have, when I started, the side handle ones, the long ones. Now they're about this long. They sit in a sleeve on your belt or on your vest, and they're expandable, so you can pull them out, and a little bit of force will extend them and lock them, and they're about yay long. And in this instance, frankly, to be, I'm almost 100% positive we have not used a baton as a striking weapon in a number of years. More often than not, they are used as pry tools. So if someone doesn't want to, they're maybe on their stomach and don't want to remove their arms from under their chest to get handcuffed, you can use a baton underneath their armpit to try and pry that arm free so you can get it. And I believe that was the intent of the officers in this case, was to try and use it to free up a limb for handcuffing.
The only other thing I noticed, must be the way I talk, it always makes the mic turn off. You know, in the background, the female was shouting, you know, stop, he has heart problems. And I didn't know how much that kind of information about a person's medical situation influences an officer's decision to use a taser.
That's hard to say, because just like when people say they have guns, come faster, are they telling the truth or not? Maybe, maybe not.
Okay.
Do they have health problems to keep something from happening? Maybe, maybe not. Are they pregnant?
I see.
Maybe, maybe not. And so, especially, it's difficult to discern, especially in the moment.
And I was just thinking the fact that you're over patrols, that's usually what we end up with when in terms of cases. And having officers that are fresh from out there, to me is a reminder, because I remember when we were training on tasers, there's a particular video in which a guy is mental, let's just say, but he's beating up another one, like in a gym. And like the officer coming in is like this high, the guy beating up is this big, and the victim is, who knows, because he's on the ground and being beaten up. And that's where I learned, what would I do? In a close quarters, if I pull a baton and that big guy doesn't care and I can't hit hard enough, what's gonna happen to me? Like, I don't wanna be there either, because there's no easy way for a regular person to stop the violence and do it in such a way that you don't end up being harmed. Pepper spray under the circumstances, too close. If there wasn't a taser, the only option is to shoot. To me, it was like, what would I do? What could I do? Leave. But that's not my job. My job is to stop it. So anyway, to me, that was a lesson in close quarters, that the taser has a place in the hierarchy. So you try to talk to them, and if it starts to get, you jump to baton, or?
Well, it's hard to say. Every situation is different. So what's your scenario, or what is your question like?
Well, in very close quarters.
You would want to work your way through the use of force continuum, but there are times where I would say there's a number of times where it's not a good idea. It's not a stair step. Well, I got to hit every stair on the way up before I get to the top. There could be any number of situations where you would go from verbal command to deadly force at the highest level, and maybe not touch anything in between. You don't have to go to verbal command to physical strength to OC spray to baton to taser to there are times where you just have to ramp up very quickly, that there is no time to try and make it through every potential option. So, does that answer your question?
I think it does. And now I'm trying to relate to our cases. When we see this was the option that they chose, and therefore it ends up on our lap. But there must have been thinking of, how else do I diffuse or take care of the situation?
But as you can see, in these cases, you've got seconds to make that determination. It's not a matter of being able to sit down and go, well, what about this? Do you think this would work? Well, let's look up this person and see if it's worked in the past, or, have a roundtable discuss. You
Yeah.
have to move quickly.
Each officer is making that determination, often with another officer, maybe within sight, but they're looking at it from their angle too.
Everybody has their own point of view, certainly. Everybody has their own information that they're trying to process. So that's when someone that's going, no, he has health conditions, does that information get processed? Did it even get heard? Did it get heard and dismissed? You have to make are they right, or are they wrong? Well, I don't know. Do you see any sort of medical devices in the room that would,
Yeah.
does he have a pacemaker on? Is there wires hanging off his chest? All of those things. But probably a common factor in most of these is they move very quickly.
Thanks for explaining that.
Okay, is it okay if we go to 5736? That's the next one? Okay. Some of these I downloaded, but I can't tell anymore. Videos. Maybe one thing we can do is for the next time, we just divvy them up and we can do the summary or.
Right, if there is a better way to bundle these. I know you spent a lot of time bundling them, but I have to, and maybe with subsequent.
Would it be better if I bundled them? If I can provide you with the redacted video to put in the portal and you watch, but then when I come play this much of it, to and then it could be shown everywhere? I think some of it might be on this
Yeah.
flash drive that you have. I just don't know which. Okay.
Yeah.
So part of it is that we have so many cases that we at least the intro of it, oh, this is the one that. Once we do that, then we can get zoned in, because people.
Would you like me to try? And
have
I'm
seen
gonna
it from
double
before,
click this
so.
and maybe, I don't know which one's the better player. VLC maybe?
Yeah.
For that.
Here he is. Playing on the big screen.
Do we have audio or we don't have audio?
This will be, see, we're in
Oh,
the
he's
30
still on
second
the-
buffer.
Okay.
So at 30 second, you should hear a very distinctive sound. That's the sound it always makes when it turns on. Hopefully coming on here in a couple seconds. I didn't
Hold it. Hey!
Is the audio good enough?
Good
I
enough.
can hear it, yeah.
Okay.
Step it up. Hey! Stay right there! Stay right there! I will tase you!
Please don't do this. That's it, like that. Please take you as a blank.
Stay right there! I will tase you!
You got it.
Do not move!
You got it.
Do not move! I will tase
Thank
you!
you. Please make me feel safe.
I will help you, but
Please.
stay right there!
Thank you. I've got me, Miss. Jump up.
Stay right there!
Make me feel safe. Pop, pop, pop. Don't
Start
make me feel
medical.
safe. Please make me feel red light.
Stay right there!
White lights all over.
Yes! Stay right there, Paul! Good
Who is
job!
it?
Good job!
Okay, thank you. All right,
Please. Oh, please.
Stay right there!
The loop's not away. Tell my mom's on my way. Tell my mom's on my way.
Paul, don't move! Don't move! Don't move! I will
If you
tase
don't
you!
mind, I'm gonna turn the audio down. I didn't.
Let's change right back. You good? Relax. You got another pair. Just hold him there. You got him? I don't want him. You good?
Can you explain, I mean, while we're watching, I hope it doesn't mess up anybody's, but what was happening, when he was there underneath the table, the taser was connected to him and she was pulling the trigger on him again?
If he's handcuffed now.
Okay, yeah.
Now we're essentially waiting for EMS to arrive, so if you, I can back it up if you'd be
Yeah.
okay with that.
Just to understand
So,
that both
right-
because of darkness, but because those two dots are,
So the two dots are the red dots from the taser, so the idea is those two dots show you where the probes are gonna go, under ideal circumstances. No probes have been deployed, it's a red dot sight, if you have any, familiarity with handguns. They make laser sights now, or laser pointers.
yeah.
They're just two laser pointers that Taser says these are where the probes, when they're ejected from the device, will strike under ideal circumstances. So that's all it is. It's an aiming device for the officers. So
So
nothing's been
she's
deployed.
calling for him to stay down, but he's not connected yet to a taser.
Not
Is-
connected yet to a
She sees
taser.
the dots, he doesn't see the dots because
Correct.
he's facing down.
Correct.
Okay.
So the taser, and the only reason I'm turning the volume down is some names in here that probably shouldn't be. So if you'd like me to start here, it'll be within,
Yeah, if you'll explain, because it's so hard for lay people, for us to see and interpret, at least for me. I
Yeah,
don't know
and
you
it gets
guys.
very dark too, so you
Yeah.
really can't see what's going on.
so the synopsis of this incident is the arrestee's in a dating relationship with the victim, who he pushed, grabbed, and drug on the ground. The arrestee then rushed and shoulder checked a police officer when they arrived. So we were dispatched.
Shoulder check means what?
Like a football tackle, like
Oh,
coming
okay.
in and gonna push past someone through the,
I've never been in football, so I have no, soccer, we call it something
so
else.
the officer who responded, again, familiarity with the subjects involved. In fact, had been told by other officers earlier in the day, we've been down there dealing with some erratic behavior again.
The mental health illness or combination of that and drug use or?
Yes,
I think they said he was schizophrenic in
Right.
the report.
Right.
I mean, I assume that's a
so
official
we
diagnosis.
get dispatched back down there by the girlfriend who says, he shoved her, he's breaking things in the house, and he's way out of control. So as this officer is arriving and meeting the female half in the front yard, it's when she sees him and hears him screaming and yelling in the house. And when as she's running to the front door, she says, "Step it up." That's on her portable radio telling other officers, "Respond faster, get here, something is happening." She comes to the front door, and he's in his current condition, yelling up and down, kind of moving in and out, and that's when she's giving the commands, "Don't move, I'll tase you." Calls him by name, she knows him. He says, "Please help me feel safe. I'll help you, stay right there, don't move." And a couple times he's acting as though he's going to get up off the ground until he does, and runs at her. So this is that again, if you can see it.
Stay right there. Start medical.
It's good to see it because it happens so fast. We could miss.
Very quickly.
What's the flashing like compared to the solid?
I don't know the real significance of one over the other, just that there's two there. There very well might be a significance, a reason Taser does that,
Oh,
but I'd just be guessing if I told you. I would suspect it has something to do with just the ability to see it in case one of them kind of.
Stay right there.
Tell my mom's on my way. Tell my mom's on my way.
Paul, don't move.
Yeah, he's really in convulsing.
I will tase you.
She doesn't fire.
But, so she connects as he's charging, is that kind of what happened? It seems like?
So, in her report, she believed that how does she put it? After reviewing the body camera footage, she believed her second taser cartridge was discharged while she was falling, based on where the wires and probes were. I think she might have shot twice, and the first one did not connect,
okay.
and the second one did, I believe is the belief. And then as she's there, right as he's on the ground, the second officer is arriving, and that's the hands you see that come in as he's running over to assist in the handcuffing portion of it, which is where we're at now.
Oh, I had a question on this because it's happened before and I forgot or I couldn't ask. So the two probes are on this guy, and the electricity runs between the two probes. But if another person touches that body,
You're good.
you're good. It doesn't come. The shock doesn't come to me if I touch the body.
Don't get between the probes.
Okay.
The electricity supposed to run in a path between the two probes as they've struck. As long as you're not grabbing between those two probes, you shouldn't be in the path of the electrical arc. I can tell you that, yes, you absolutely can, and they teach, grab them. As soon as they're down, grab them, grab hands, you'll be fine. And way more often than not, that's true. It's probably fair to say that there have been one or two instances at some point, somewhere, where someone has gotten in the middle of that circuitry and got
And they
a
get
little
struck.
shock. But that is, yes, we're taught, and more often than not, you can absolutely, and you should, because while that discharge is occurring, that 5 seconds, if it's a good lockup where the person is incapacitated and you have that ability to grab a hand, get them behind their back, get them in handcuffs, potentially before the 5 seconds is over. 5 seconds is over, their body releases, there's no neuromuscular incapacitation, their muscles aren't seized up anymore, but they're now in handcuffs and secure. So it's not impossible to get shocked, but it's highly unlikely.
Just in case I need that.
So, you know, but yeah, we teach the officers, and we do it, that you can and should be
Use that
grabbing,
time.
even while it's arcing. You'll hear it. It sounds painful, but as long as you're not in between that pathway, you're fine.
Okay. Good. Questions or lessons that we have from here that might affect policy? Yes, she got
I don't-
called out?
Yeah, she got called out. I don't think there's anything wrong on the officer's behalf.
They had a history already. That was, I mean, it's interesting, but it's
Yeah.
also like even more legit. They know they're walking into somebody
Right,
who's,
yeah. No, I mean, I don't see anything wrong here. I mean, it's almost kind of, I mean, just watching his behavior, it reminded me of like some kind of like a zombie show that I've seen, like, or
Yeah.
like just
Yeah.
the way it, and how it changed so quickly. He just got,
Very
yeah, he
erratic.
got up
Yeah,
and
it was
went
just-
for her.
yeah,
And this would be an instance where they were notified ahead of time, don't move, I will tase you.
Yeah.
He moved anyway.
yeah. I mean, whether or not he even, who knows what was going through his head at the
If he
time.
even
it's-
recognized it or not.
He may not have even known. Yeah, no, it's
I don't know if it's pertinent at all, but the first stop for him was the hospital.
yeah.
Yeah. Actually, the supplemental reports on this really help out. Again, got to close the case mentally because you wonder what happened. And in this case, the follow-ups are very appreciated, so good packet making too.
Yeah.
So.
I guess my only question is, I mean, when someone is known to have a severe mental illness, as this person had, was schizophrenic, and also heavily under the influence of a drug, does that change? And I also know that police officers who use tasers have to undergo crisis intervention training. But I wondered, when you're entering a situation with someone known to have a severe mental illness, if that changes the kind of the formula about using tasers, because you know this person. I noticed Detective Page or Detective Bennett was on the scene, and I don't know if this was before in her role as the co-crisis responder or not, but I didn't know if that was
She was a
factored in.
patrol officer at the time.
She was, okay. I know at some point after that time, her role changed, and she became more involved in crisis
So your
intervention.
question is, do you treat someone differently if you know they have certain conditions?
A severe mental illness, yeah.
A severe mental illness.
As it relates to tasering, using the taser that.
More often than not, no, you're not looking. You have to look at everything through the lens of violence, through the lens of, does it rise to that level to where I'm trying to think of how I can phrase this to where it makes the most sense. You take everything into account, that you have time to take everything into account for it when you're approaching one of these. And again, this is an instance where the officer shows up, is met as soon as she walks up to the house, the front yard, and if I can think of a million different scenarios, I don't know how useful it is to play the what-if game, but if things were different and if it wouldn't have unfolded in the way that it did, could there have been a different approach to where, oh, we know he's in the house, but nothing's happening, and she's not screaming in the front yard, and he's not right there, and as we rush up, he's on the floor doing his thing. If she says, he's in the upstairs bathroom, a little bit agitated, and we have the background on him, could we handle things differently? Absolutely, but you have to handle the situations based on how they're presented to you. And so, based on this incident and how it was presented in his response, I would agree. I believe it's within policy. I think there's no problem on as far as the use of force concern, but you're trying to go off the behavior that is presented to you, not necessarily basing it off of someone's kind of getting stuck here.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm
I
helping
think I
at all,
understand what you're saying.
but
have
you
to
know what I'm trying to
Deal with
get
the
at.
facts and
We have to
before
deal
you.
with them as they're laid out in front of us.
Yeah.
And so a situation like this,
Yeah.
no, I wouldn't ever tell my officers that if you know someone has a mental illness, these tools are off the table.
Yeah, sure.
Because if he had a mental illness, but he came at her with a machete, I'm not going to say,
Yeah, just because
schizophrenics
they're
can
mental.
never get shot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You don't ever want it to happen. There are situations where it might have to happen,
yeah.
so.
I guess where I'm going in my head is I know the city is moving in the direction, as some other communities have moved, and the university has moved to having kind of a full-fledged co-crisis responder model, so that someone who is fully trained to deal with people who are, has severe mental illness can accompany police officers. And I'm just trying to think, if the day when we are at that place, when we have a full co-crisis responder model in place, would this have played out differently? And I'm hearing you say you still have to look at what's right there.
These facts, I would not send a social worker in to handle. Maybe 6 hours earlier,
Yeah.
If it would have come out at that time, it would be a good time to go. Things are getting a little amped up tonight. He's a little extra on edge. What can you do to help? And maybe we can get there, but at this point, we're kind of at the end of the scenario where we've reached, critical mass.
Gotcha.
And now we have to kind of handle things as they are presented, so.
So maybe as a preventative, that would be where
Yeah.
that model would
But
have,
if
might have made a difference.
in that scenario, if it would have been 6 hours earlier and things would have been calmer, if an officer would have rushed in and discharged a taser because, hey, later tonight, he might get violent, that would be way outside of policy and way outside of norms and expectations. But again, we're stuck with the facts as they are presented and the situation as it unfolded at that moment in time, so.
No,
Actually,
thank you.
for me, this situation, we have 4 points of view. I mean, but it happens in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Basically. So what kind of call comes in that triggers that 4 officers can show up to be there already? Because my experience here in Urbana is usually you get called and there's an officer in their patrol car, and then they might decide to call somebody else. This is,
Well, not
we're a
just, they
small
might
town, so,
decide to call somebody else. It 4 might be the entire shift.
Yeah.
And 3 of them might be tied up on something else at the time, or they might all be responding, but this officer happened to be 2 blocks away, and this officer's coming from this building, or North Cunningham, and we're heading down in the southern part of town. Someone's always going to be there first. Not always. There are times where everyone will converge together. Similarly, in a situation like this, if you were to hear someone getting what sounds like attacked, accosted, screaming, yelling, you can't sit outside and go, I gotta wait for the other 3 to show up before I address it. The officers are put in a situation where they might be the first officer on scene, and they might have to be the only officer on scene for a while.
when, yeah.
Now, we do live in a community that's not terribly huge, but it does take time to get from one side of town to the other, unlike the county where you might be going from Homer to Mahomet, and that's going to be a much longer response for backup. But there are often instances where the first officer shows up, has to handle the call by themselves until everyone else gets there. And in this instance, the second officer was there. That was a 3-minute clip, and so the beginning was the officer walking up, and about 2 minutes in, the second officer had arrived. So it was only
They were outside
2
already.
minutes, but 2 minutes is a long time in some scenarios.
Yeah. Well, any more questions or policy recommendations on this one? That's, page 736. Okay, we kind of skipped, or in
think we missed the
numerous,
number, yeah,
664,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because that one didn't have 4 digits, but I did the same thing, that
Yeah.
0
Yeah.
threw me off. So we do have one more to do. It doesn't, as long as we're fully engaged, the time passes, but it is gonna be 8, so just to pace ourselves. It is the last one, and let's see what we can learn. It's different. And the one thing I want to point out on this one for me is that I had seen the form before, the colored form at the end, arrest without a warrant. And I don't remember seeing those before. So can you explain to me how that form fits, or why is it in this kind of package sometimes? In this
So you're
case, it
talking
was
about this form?
the forgery.
Notice of
Yeah,
arrest
that
without
one.
warrant. Okay, this form is the form that's always used at the county jail. So this is part of the intake paperwork. So we bring someone there for criminal charges to potentially be filed the following day by the state's attorney's office. This is the form that allows us to tell the jail who we have, why they are there, and some basic information on the bottom about the date and time of arrest, the place of arrest, who's the arresting officer, what's the case number for that agency, and then there's a small section where an employee of the jail will fill out saying, this is the time I received the person.
Okay.
So it's essentially a standard form. I believe it's triplicate. The pink copy is the one that we get, and they tear off, here's your copy, and they keep this copy, and one gets routed that
So
direction.
paperwork for handing off somebody in custody.
So this is kind of the initial form to say, this is who we have, and this is why we are giving them to you. So,
Okay. Well, good. We're looking at the Taser usage form. The videos outside the bank are there for us. I don't know how we want to start on this one, but we've already, this one played through.
I didn't force nothing, man. I didn't do anything. Hey, I didn't do anything. Son, I did not do anything. I didn't do anything.
Listen, we can deal with that.
Hey, no. No, I didn't do anything.
The video's not
Okay, because
erased faces, and so
okay,
I'm just getting contextualized here because we probably can't play it.
okay.
No, because this shit bogus. Man, I got the messages in my fucking phone from the man.
But listen,
Hey, Will, help me out here, bro. Because you know what's going on.
hey, listen,
Nah, man, because I know.
we can work on this.
Hey,
You gotta relax
no.
now. Okay?
Hey, y'all might as well take me to the hospital. Because no, I didn't do nothing. No, because I ain't did shit. Just relax. No. I can't breathe.
Okay. You want to give us the summary of what's gonna happen or what
Sure,
happened?
so this is February of 2020. Police were dispatched for a mail that appeared to be cashing a check that was forged. This occurred at a bank here in town. Officers located the mail and learned that he was not the person on the identification card or the person that the check was issued to. When the mail was being arrested, he tried to pull away from police and would not comply with commands. He was tased and mail was taken to the hospital and then to the jail.
Any comments, questions, guys?
So I'm just, when you get a call for, it's a financial crime.
Right.
Is it just one squad that responded and then they called for backup, or?
I can look here to see if I can kind of discern that. 3 officers responded because the suspect was still there. So if it was, they found a forged check or had information that someone that had been there previously, but because he was on scene, more officers would respond.
Okay.
And that allows an officer to go inside, talk to people at the bank, while other officers are outside interacting with the person and making a determination on where we need to go with this.
Keep thinking, my natural question, every time I see a bunch of squad cars, my first reaction is to just go away, go as far as I can, because I have no idea. I mean, we've seen enough video to say they're so varied.
Yeah.
And so in one case, there could have been a gun, in another case, I mean, several cars, police cars at a bank. I'm not gonna get there, but what is the, I mean, that's my first reaction, but I don't even know what we're supposed to do.
I guess my only question was, they had, it looks like at one point there's like 3 officers trying to restrain him. He's got some items in his hand, and then he somehow he just evades their ability to restrain him. I mean, it just,
Seems
how
unlikely? Is that
it's escaping me as to how that happened. I mean, it's not Houdini, or is he Houdini? And does it happen that often, or like it seems like they?
It's not unheard of.
Yeah.
And if you've ever, even with training and repeated training over and over and over again.
And so this is practice. Like, let's do a arrest of a person who's being recalcitrant is not
It's
not actively
difficult to
fighting, but
practice those because that's how elbows get broken and shoulders get ripped out, which end up being really bad for the person that, you know, the person who you're practicing on.
Right.
So practicing use of force scenarios are difficult to do. You can set up the scenario, but as far as someone actually physically fighting back, it's very fine line between providing enough resistance to allow the person to try and use the technique and, oops, I just tore somebody's shoulder out of socket, or,
Right.
you know, ripped a.
But I mean, there are like pressure points that people learn or officers learn. I think, goosenecking is one where you,
Gooseneck's not,
that not allowed, I don't remember.
it's not a pressure point, it would be, to an extent, it's pressure counter pressure.
Yeah.
So a gooseneck would be where you would put your hand on top
Yeah,
of
and push.
someone's and bring it down while you're trapping the elbow.
Yeah.
And typically done behind someone's back, where you can use your chest to keep, because the way you evade it is just, if you're pushing down, I just push down.
Yeah.
So there needs to be that thing trapping the arm.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility. There are pressure points. They're painful, they're pain compliance, they're easy to overcome. There's pressure points under the nose.
Mm-hmm.
You overcome that by raising your head.
Sure.
There's pressure points behind the ear, you turn your head. So the question is, does it take 3 people to handcuff someone, or yes, at times it can. And if a person doesn't want to be handcuffed, can they provide enough resistance to keep that from happening? Yes. Yes, they can. You could move into the striking. In fact, I believe in one of the reports, an officer states that they attempted a straight arm takedown. And a straight arm takedown is another instance where you try and lock someone's elbow and then use a locked arm as a fulcrum to swing them down to the ground.
Right.
But unless you can trap that elbow to where it can't move, if someone can bend it, then there goes all of the ability to use it to swing that person. So, yeah, having done this for a number of years, that idea has popped into my head several times over the years. Is I would love to provide some type of like on the mat training to where allow someone to fight back. You know, like, take knives out of it, take guns out of it. No one's going to get shot or killed or anything, but if it was just, this person's on the ground, put them in handcuffs. How easy would it be to do? Not always as easy as you think. There are times where it would be extremely difficult, especially for, you know, younger males that are strong, that it can be really hard, so.
That's good learning. When it comes to the case,
No, go ahead.
questions, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, but it sounds like that is part of the training of officers, because that was my single question too, is, you know, why, sometimes it seems like there's 1 or 2 officers on the scene in these 5 cases we looked at, other times it's like 3 or 4. You know, as part of the training that they learn how to work in tandem to sort of,
Absolutely, that's
Get
part of the training
compliance.
from the beginning of PTI up through every year at annual training, up through a number of officers have been certified in control tactics. But yes, that's frequent, it's ongoing, and despite, like anything else, it's not foolproof. You can be trained in how to deploy a taser and you miss. We train repeatedly over and over again on the range, and awful lot of misses when it comes time to it. You do the best you can and do your best to rely on the training that you have received. It doesn't always work.
I would say, just here, I mean, the officer does yell taser, which, is within policy. It also seems to help, and it's noted in the reports, the other officers know this is gonna happen, they kind of step back, and then as the guy's tased, they do, help him fall to the ground. They don't just let him drop. So, I mean, after trying to subdue him, and it's heavily documented that they tried to do it before having used taser. So, I mean, if you
By
got
the book.
Yeah, it's pretty by the book, and if this kid is amped up and he's not letting him do it, it makes sense to move to the next step, so.
Yeah.
I don't see anything wrong with it. I guess, my only questions was, how often does one person evade 3 officers trying to detain him, and.
Yeah, it does seem like that, but again, we're trying to use the minimal amount of force necessary to affect whatever it is we're trying to do.
Right.
In this case, affect an arrest. So could one officer have subdued him?
Maybe.
Yeah, if he used more force than he
Right,
needed
he comes
to
and
use.
breaks his arm, and then he's not going anywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
no, he didn't use the taser, but he still, harmed him, but.
Right, so, you could pull your baton out and start
Yeah,
beating him on the back of the
right.
head. It would probably work. It would not be within policy,
Right.
and would likely end in criminal charges for the officer.
Right.
But yes, quite often it does not look the greatest when you get several people that are trying to physically control someone and they're screaming and yelling and going, this and that. At times, are they playing for the camera? Yes. And, at times it's not as easy as it looks, I think is probably the most.
Yeah. There is. So I'm writing down that for this one, we also don't have any policy recommendations. There's a lot of learning here as to what's happening and for what reasons. But I think this one we can also say that things happened as we expected them. The system is working, and we have good documentation policy that allows us to make that decision. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't have any policy recommendations for this one.
Okay. Well, good. I have to say for myself, I'm glad that we're going just to the relevant parts. We don't have a lot of practice doing them. There's maybe 5 or 6 more discharges on the docket for to prepare that have happened since 2020, the last 2 years. But this is good progress. As more of us also have experience with it, we can zoom into those parts that we might want to ask questions and maybe come up with other recommendations. But for me, this is educational. For us, for whoever's at home, there's just not enough exchanges, so we end up with wondering what you're doing and why you're doing it. Sure. And we often get pressure of, you didn't ask enough. And it's like, well, we asked what we thought because we're regular people too. And so if, for camera, if anybody has questions, you're watching, you are able to watch live, you can communicate. I just checked my mail, but this is a learning experience for everybody involved, in the community. And the more we learn, the easier it is to flow and not make, there are mistakes, but not make assumptions. That's what gets me. We very quickly jump to, this is what must have happened. And we don't, until you see it all together, it's very hard to check. So the distance of 2 years in this case is maybe a bit much, but it should be after the fact for us to project into the future. So anyway, Carla, I think I think it's the next regular meeting that we could do tasers, but I don't know how far behind we are in actual numbers, and so you might want to check.
I think there's 9 pending, but several of those are not, they're still in the court system.
they're still
But
gonna
I
come
mean,
out.
between the 5 that we finished today and today on the street, I believe there's been 9 taser discharges.
Okay.
So that would have been 2020, I don't know if we got all the way through 2020.
Yeah,
Did we?
well, we did 4 of 2020, but I don't know, I didn't see how many more we had, because we put all of these in one folder.
2 more. We got through 2020. I think there's 2 in 21 that are ready. I'm just looking at the Excel spreadsheet.
There are 2 in 21,
Okay,
or, no, 22. There might be 2 in 21 that are ready for this.
okay,
In all of 2022, I believe there were 2 discharges, so we will get to them eventually.
yeah.
Okay,
So the good thing is that we have the experience for today. We don't have to schedule them for the next quarterly meeting that we have. But the faster we process them, there's already distance that it's easier, and we'll take a smaller portion of the meeting if we do just 1 or 2. So it does commit us for seeing each other, but I think that's a good thing. When we have rapport, we can ask, you can predict this.
So I understand you correctly, your preference would be to have this as a portion of every quarterly meeting? So what?
Not necessarily every quarterly meeting. There are
Every other.
times, like this next quarterly meeting, we probably are gonna deal with, we don't have a date yet,
September 27th.
September,
Yeah, September is the next one.
yeah. So in September, we're likely to have to do, so we don't fall too far behind,
Okay.
the September
I will
27th,
do
so.
my best to make sure that everyone that is available, that I get those redacted and get
Okay,
them ready. And again, your preference would be to have the entire thing, and then maybe if I could bring smaller snippets?
yeah, so we can zoom in. So that's a question, technical question of how we can make it so that we can see the video and accelerate. If we
Oh,
can't.
I'm not sure I can help on that end
Yeah,
at all.
yeah,
as far
so
as
this
what
is
can
a-
be put in the portal,
yeah.
but it's what I could bring to our conversations here, or maybe the 3-minute version instead of the 30-minute
Yeah.
version.
Yeah, the 2 to 3 minute ones are, I think, captured everything
Yeah.
we wanted to see.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Having the full-on one unredacted, it would be great just to leave on the portal if we wanted to look into it, but
Yeah.
I think for,
Again, that's the transparency part,
Right,
but the
yeah.
usefulness and efficiency ought to be that we do here. When we used to listen to audio, we would sit here for 5 minutes listening to bzzz, and it was very, very sad. But we, due diligence, we needed to do it because that's what we said we were gonna do. In this case, though, as we get more practice, we can come to that part, and if there were questions, we could go to the big video. But you prepping just the parts where we can learn something from it.
And there's always the potential that if there are questions that can't be answered, we could table it and come back to it the next time.
come back.
If
Yeah.
if you wanted more.
That would be good.
Yeah.
So, okay, any other cases or tasers comments? So we got a couple of comments there that we've summarized. When it comes to the agenda, we normally have a second public input. Thank you, public, but there's no one else here to make comments. So we're just to close off the meeting. Any comments, announcements from you guys' actions? We decided we're gonna do the Saturday market, and I'll do my part for that. We have 2 members up for renewal for the board, but right now we're holding steady at 5. And so 3 make a quorum, just to clarify for everybody, and that's what we did today. But it means that because the other Tony left, we do have 2 openings, and the public should know that it's a process. They call the mayor's office and get the forum and do the thing. We'd welcome 2 more people from Urbana to do it. And I think that's it. September 27th is our next. Oh, for us to mark it up, okay?
Yeah.
Good.
I gave you my thing, so, okay.
So before we leave, we just check in, all right? Anything else? Nothing?
I was just
Oh,
wondering, could I ask, I know you'd mentioned that the police give a use of force report to city council on a scheduled basis. And I try and follow what's coming up before city council, but I often miss what's gonna happen. And I wondered, could you let us know when those police use of force reports are made before city council so we could be present for those? Do you get that information? Yeah, if it's easy to, right, or other relevant reports, because
I believe the ordinance says it's due sometime near the beginning of the year, around now, I think.
I'll just look, I'll look it
Yeah,
up and
so
I'll do
it
some
would be
research.
sometime in the spring, I
in
believe.
this,
for the
okay, all right, so maybe
previous
it's still
year.
yet to come. That w- Yeah. I'll look it up. Thank you.
All right, we good?
Mo- you know,
Yes, yes, please.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second that.
And everybody say aye all together.
Aye.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant Spicer.
Thank you so much.